What's up, guys? Welcome to the GamerMD83 podcast. I'm MD, and this is Nick.
Hello, I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hello.
So for today's podcast, we are going to talk about the news.
Good news.
Good news! And by that sounds like a huge, broad topic, but what we're going to talk about, not just how news can inform, but also how it's used, how it's acquired.
How it's spun.
Specifically in the gaming industry.
So yeah, I mean, we live in an era of questionable news reporting generally, but also we live in an era where news reporting is at the fingertips of pretty much everyone, anybody with a smartphone. Mm-hmm. While it's a fairly broad topic, it's something that is key to, the success or failure of a lot of stuff in the games industry.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that we both deal with, I think, on a daily basis in what we do for our jobs.
I think so too. I think there's going to be an element of an opposing view. You as a journalist and me as a developer. And I guess what's going to fill the focus for our conversation tonight is likely going to be contemporary. I don't think we're going to be talking about minstrels or Roman entertainment. Parody of politicians.
I think what I'm really interested in how news is told now, and how we're going to get into this, but how news is manipulated or how people get attached to certain ideas when somebody gives their news, quote unquote, their news, and then somebody else on social media, it's just available to everyone at the tip of your fingers. And it's like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
I think, we are hopefully going to go some ways to answering that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think on balance, it's a good thing. Generally, I think it's likely to be, it's a system of delivering confirmation bias to people that are looking for it. Mm-hmm. The way politics is reported now, even the news has split into two camps. Like, in the United States, there's two major political parties. Fox News on one side, CNN, NBC, MSNBC on the other. Yeah. And it's little more than, people hitting the feeder bar wanting a food pellet. You want to get reassurance that what you believe is true, and there is an outlet to give you exactly that. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, these days, at the expense of accuracy and at the expense of the full picture. Yeah. Certain journalists in Fox News give the following exactly what they want to hear, and exactly the same as MSNBC. And, it's not our job now to kind of dissect that, to work out who's right and who's wrong. It's just the nature of the beast. And, having been on the development side of game news journalism for 15 years now, and seeing the reporting of the games that I've worked on, I'm glad to say that for a lot of that time, it has been impartial, and reviews that have been presented through official platforms and outlets have been generally accurate. Right. You can look at the game you've just released and then see what people have written about it when they are attached to proper outlets, and it's like, well, do you know what? Yeah, they've kind of got a point. Mm-hmm. Or, well done for recognizing that, because we put an awful lot of effort into it. Right. In this business, you don't want confirmation bias, you want critique. Yes. Because that's how you improve. Yeah. But as we've said, media like YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, social media of all different flavors puts news reporting and influencing in the hands of absolutely anybody. Mm-hmm. And there's no guidelines. As such, you get very, very loud, very entertaining people, and it's kind of descending into a similar confirmation bias dealership. Yeah.
It becomes kind of like people agreeing because they like a specific personality opposed to the actual news. It's like, oh yeah, this person could never say wrong, so therefore
they're always right, and let's listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from your chair, which is the chair that everyone wants to be hearing from, what's your view on that kind of more sensationalized reporting?
Well, we see it a lot on YouTube. I think it's one of the YouTube is that, people follow personalities, not so much news. So if their favorite personality is going to talk about whatever topic, they're going to agree with them, or they're going to like the way that they said it. And the great thing about that is when that person is informed about the topic. If that person is informed and they're sharing their opinion after they have presented the facts, then that is a good reporter, in my opinion, a good journalist. Because that's what I strive for. Because news is facts and opinion. It's kind of like the whole idea of objective or subjective, right? It's I believe it's our job as journalists to inform the public about something, whether it's a review or news about something that was, released to the public, and then giving the opinion about it, because it's like, usually that's what YouTubers do. It's the whole idea of how YouTube started mixed with the vlogs. So it's almost never just news. It's always news and then a little bit of a quote unquote vlog where you share your opinion about it. It's kind of what I do as well. But as long as they're informed and they share the facts first, then that's good because they're providing the tools for the viewer or the listener to base their own opinion, to form their own opinion. But when they twist the facts to fit what they're trying to what their agenda, that's where I don't like it. That's where I am like, that is manipulation of your audience, and that's not cool.
But on both of those things, manipulation of your audience, I mean, if you present facts and then present an opinion after it, surely you're colouring the understanding that your audience is actually going to form of the topic that you're talking about, regardless of whether your opinion is a good or bad one.
You mean that my opinion is being told so that people could agree with me?
No, that you provide an opinion at all is going to influence how people receive those facts. Like the Cavill as Geralt video that you did, you provided the facts and then you gave them opinion, and the opinion was you didn't like it, or you thought there was a lot of room for improvement. And as it goes, a lot of your audience followed that opinion. Where if you go back and you understand journalism to be a 100% impartial mechanism by which new events or news gets delivered to people, you stop at the facts and people make their own minds up. So to kind of follow that with a question, do you think that the opinion part of that is the bigger motivation now, given that YouTube is about garnering and growing a following?
That's an interesting question, because I think that the opinion part definitely can persuade people to change their opinion, where they're like, you know what, that's a really good point. It's something that they never thought about or something. With my YouTube channel, what I try to do is, present the facts, as I was saying, and then give my opinion, but always offer a voice to the viewer, saying, share your opinions in the comments down below type of thing. So it's like, here's what I think, but if you guys disagree, feel free to say so. I think what I try to never do, that I know that some people do, I never try to manipulate somebody to think the way that I do. It's like, they've got their own opinions, so share them. But with the bigger news sites, like your IGNs or your GameSpots, the ones that have way more reach, they have so much more to think about. They have so much more to consider. How many hits they get on their site. Do they benefit from getting people to agree with them and not with the competing news site? That kind of thing. So sometimes they will spin news in order to make people maybe agree more with them than with, say, whoever else.
Do you think then it becomes about being entertaining?
It's not my motivation, but I know a lot of people, it's like news reporters, they will hire people that are entertaining, with big personalities, because they could capture an audience. And when people are captured and they find them charismatic, it's almost always easier to get the audience to agree with what they're saying.
I phrased the question quite poorly in terms of getting the answer that I was actually expecting, and you raise an interesting point, and a very valid point too, which is, given that it's a news media, you want someone to actually draw people in, even before you've got to the news bit, because groundbreaking news, earth-shattering news, you can't predict when it's going to hit, and you can't predict a steady stream of it.
Exactly.
But what you can predict is if someone who has the character to actually be charismatic in how they deliver the news, you can guarantee that that is always going to be a constant. As an example, without a doubt, there are some very confident, verbose, charismatic people who are caricatures of what people think their roles should be. And I'm thinking of the Bill O'Reilly, Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones. And then on the other side, a few years ago, it was Keith Olbermann, Rachel Maddow, Bill Maher. Very, very charismatic speakers, very, very forceful speakers. And for their base, incredibly entertaining, and that they are reinforcing what their base believes. Pretty sure that their ratings are going to be amazing.
Yeah.
In game journalism, or in the YouTube space, there is a trend for being scathing and loud and obnoxious, and that on its own is entertaining, and people will invariably go. I mean, I've seen very, very loud, outspoken, opinionated people, and I know this is true because it's happened to games that I've worked on, completely misunderstand the point of what we were aiming for, or they have taken the merest hint of a detail of something that is highly anticipated, and they have assumed the worst.
Right.
And because it's presented in a very energetic, very well-spoken, well-recorded, but very cutting manner, 80,000 clicks per video, I'm sure they get 100,000, 200,000, 250,000, 500,000 followers, and they will listen to news presented in that way rather than news just presented. And, maybe it's a thing now that people feel that news has to get their blood up for it to feel real.
It reminds me of the idea of not just being loud, but it's like everybody, what I was saying, everybody can do it. And, I know it's entertaining. Sometimes some people, it's like, sometimes they could be really funny. And it's, I've watched a few reviews from YouTube personalities that are loud and dramatic. They like to point out mostly the negative, and they make it a rant and everything. And then people, they find it funny, and they tune into those loud ones mostly. As much as I know that they're entertaining, it's kind of doing the game, the developer, and the industry a disservice, because many times it is unfair. It's unfair because it will kill a game. For example, The Order 1886. It wasn't, I'm not saying it was the best game ever, but it was definitely a game that I think could have taught a lot of developers how to do something, how to create a new IP that looked amazing. Still up to this day it's one of the games that looks the best, I think, in my opinion. It suffered in gameplay. The QTEs was kind of like a bit much, and it was like, okay, but it wasn't bad, for it to have crashed and burned the way that it did, and for the reasons that it did, I think is very unfair. And it was all because of people reviewing in this manner, where they made this huge deal about how horrible this game was because it was short. Okay, that it's short is a personal opinion. That, I don't like short games. That's a personal opinion. There have been plenty of short games. I mean, all the games in the past were pretty freaking short. Gears of War was like 5 hours. And that game was amazing. People love that game. Now, granted, it did have multiplayer, so you could play it for longer.
Yeah.
But so many games I could go on mentioning are shorter than The Order 1886, and they're great. They're considered to be great games. So it was annihilated mostly because it was short. And how dare they charge $60? And it was like, people actually put time and effort to create this game. Like, what do you want them to give it to you for free? Like, look at it. It's a gorgeous game. The time that they put into that game for it to look the way it looked, just because it was short, it's not worth $60, and because it had a few QTEs too much. But, that is a Sony thing. QTEs is a Sony thing. It's not the first time they've done it before. So the way the news spun that game, the reviews of that game, I think it's one of those cases that I just absolutely do not agree with when it comes to how people take reviews and the news in their hands, and they could absolutely do it, do a game a disservice and kill a game that deserves better.
There may be a conflict of interest in me saying this right now, but Mass Effect Andromeda, when it came out, wasn't subjected to the same kind of thing that you're talking about with The Order, but I think a new phenomenon happened, and a relatively new phenomenon anyway, that Mass Effect might have been one of the first through the wall on, and that was the press embargo for launch.
Yes.
Was at the end of a week-long early access period where the public could play the games and the journalists couldn't talk about the game. And that allowed there to be a narrative that rippled around the internet before the outlets could say what they wanted to. And, a game like that, which is keenly anticipated by an awful lot of people, in the hands of players who have access to the internet and can say anything they like. Yeah. There was no way that any news outlet was going to go against the tide. And there was a hell of a tide. There was a tsunami of opinion about, that game for that early access period.
And it's important to mention as well that this early access period only allowed you to play, 7 or 10 hours of the game?
Yeah, the prologue, basically.
To be making a review based off of just those few hours, the prologue, in a game that could be up to over 50 hours long. I didn't think that was right.
I think every game that comes out now, with few exceptions, has to be gorgeous, regardless of whether it's a 200-hour RPG or an 8-hour thrash. That there is a spirit amongst the audience that the game developer has to live up to audience expectations makes it a very, very difficult task. For a lot of reasons, a couple of specifics. The people that speak loudly online are a tiny minority of the actual percentage of people that buy and play the product. Do you bend an entire project to suit the vocal majority? I mean, I appreciate just as much as anybody else that word of mouth is very, very important for every entertainment media form. But when you have, on its best day, maybe 1% of your audience who buys the game actually goes online and talks about the game. Dragon Age Inquisition sold more than 8 million copies. There weren't 80,000 people, reviewing Dragon Age Inquisition online. So it's difficult from this side. Because you want to be frankly and emotionally honest, and you can't.
No, yeah, I understand absolutely, and on my side, you get it's difficult as well because people that go on and either have a YouTube channel or they just go on Twitter or whatever, and they give their quote unquote review of something. People know that you could tell when somebody does it for a living. And when somebody just gave their opinion, right? Like, for example, me or anybody else that does game reviews on, say, YouTube. I'm gonna talk about YouTube mostly because that's what I'm involved with. That's what I know. But it's difficult because we do this for a living, or at least I do this. I'm trying to do this for a living, and I put a lot of my time in order to and I put a lot of my time and dedication to getting the news and getting what I'm gonna say, because I'm basically reporting to 58,000 people. So to me, it's important to be fair to those people and to give the news as it is, and then share my opinion. But you get there's so many people that think that us that do this for a living are bought, and that's not fair, because I know that some people, I think the minority of people that do this, especially for the gaming industry, because gamers, when they have something to say, they will say it. They don't need to be bought.
Well, I know you've been offered paid gigs in the past, and you've actually turned them down because you don't want to compromise your, you don't want to compromise your perceived integrity.
Yeah, I a lot of times, I won't name names, but some developers have come to me and said, "We'll send you this game if you review it," or and sometimes I've accepted it because I've basically straight out told them. I could say, I'm going to say whatever I want about it. And they say, yeah, be as honest as you want. And it's like, cool. But sometimes when it's been paid, I don't feel too comfortable about it, because it's like, are they expecting something from me? Are they expecting something that they want me to say? And I've turned it down. I don't tell them that's why I'm turning it down, but it's like, no, I'm not interested or whatever. Some people think that all these companies pay me to say what I say, and it's like, oh, dude, I wish, I wouldn't be struggling so much. But no, this is all free advertisement for the companies. And because I believe in them, I report on things that I believe in and that I know that my followers want to see. And I'm always honest, because people deserve that honesty. They deserve the truth. They deserve the facts of something. And they deserve to know what I want. They're following me because they like my personality. And if I'm going to be fake, that's me just not caring about these people. And that's absolutely not what I'm like. So that is another thing, is people not believing news sources because they think that they're bought, or they believe news sources that aren't being truthful to them. Or if they are being truthful, they're manipulating it in a way to suit them, to suit their agenda. And that's not cool to me either. And that happens a lot nowadays.
It's strange, but the what you were saying a little bit ago about companies approaching you saying, yep, just be honest, say what you need to say.
Yeah.
It's a door that swings two ways. Mm-hmm. I remember you were reviewing, again, a conveniently nameless product that may or may not be a VR peripheral. But you were honest with how, the setup for that thing was.
Yeah, and the experience I was having with it.
Yeah, which serves, if they're aiming to aiming to release a consumer product, the consumers that buy it are going to be disappointed because they would fail at the first step. It took you and I 3 or 4 hours of trying to do certain, pairing and repairing of Bluetooth devices to try to get this thing to actually work, to no effect. And what are you supposed to do under those circumstances?
I know.
Do you not review it? Do you keep your opinions to yourself? Do you?
Yeah, no. See, that's where I'm like, the people need to know this, and even the thing that really bothered me about that was a company can always, even if something isn't working, a company can always buy that person back. And by buy, I mean like can appeal to that person again, and not be like just completely like, okay, we're out of their line of sight. Basically, we've lost. No, like if something's not working and that company steps forward and they're like, yeah, we know you're having issues, let me help you. Let's work this out. Let's get this fixed for you. That's when it's like, that's cool. Like you're good in my book. Even if this didn't work, you helped me, and you stood up for what you believed in, and you made me believe in the product as well, because you got it working and you showed me how to do it. I was probably doing it wrong. Thank you. But when that company comes forward and they're like, oh, we see how it is, basically screw you. And it's like, okay, you don't like what I'm saying? Then go to hell, basically.
So having said all of that stuff about reporting various aspects of game journalism and news about products and software and offering opinions about the experiences that are associated with those, without a doubt, game journalism in all of its flavors feeds the hype machine for a lot of different products. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago where I woke up first thing in the morning, I looked at Twitter moments, which is what I do generally, and your face is there. And because I was half asleep, I was really, really confused. It's like, what's happening? But 2,500 likes later and 800 new followers, you managed to get that photograph in front of Amblin Entertainment, and and I love the 80s. But it was the Red Dead Redemption 2 hype machine. And even though you were on the periphery of it and you hadn't really, you'd done your week-long build-up, this notoriety didn't come from any of that hard work. It came from, what was probably...
From a Back to the Future shirt that you gave me.
I wasn't going to claim responsibility for that piece of genius, but it was more that it was a kind of chance off the cuff. I've just got the game. Look how happy it's making me.
Yeah.
And it was great for Twitter, it was great for Rockstar, and as it turns out, great for your subscription base. So how do you see, let's talk personally, how do you see your role in the hype machine for the games that you report on and support?
Gosh, this is a huge topic for me, because this is what I do, right? I create hype for these games, because when I'm hyped, I get others hyped, whether I want to or not. But because I'm sharing my enthusiasm about a game that I'm really hyped about, people get hyped. And I don't do it, when I think of hype, a lot of people will say in my comments, they'll be like, MD, be careful, you shouldn't create so much hype, because you don't know if the game's going to be good or not, and then you're just going to be disappointed, and all these types of things. I've read those comments basically all my YouTube life. But for me, it's really not about the hype. It's about informing about a game that I'm looking forward to, which later turns out to be hype. But that kind of hype, I think, is fun. People, when a game is released, people look back on that hype and they're like, God, I missed that. That was really fun. It was fun to look into those, like the hype for Dragon Age Inquisition, for Mass Effect 3, for the previous Mass Effect 2. That was so much fun. Because, I would go on there and get all the information and then be like, oh my God, they're actually going to do this and that. And it's like, oh my God, I can't wait to make this video. It's just more about enthusiasm. It's more about having fun with my love for games and the creation of games. It's celebrating games. That's how I see it. What I think is hype is not a very good idea when developers developers and publishers, when they create hype way too soon, where it's like, this game they don't even know what this game is going to look like yet, and they're already announcing it on E3, and it's like coming out in 2025 kind of thing. That's exaggerated, but right. Where it's like, oh okay, people, they'll either forget it or they will create hype, and they'll start forming, since they have nothing to see, they'll start forming their own expectations. And almost always a developer and a publisher, it's logical, not just because they didn't try, but it's logical that they will not be able to achieve what people expect. There's always going to be somebody that's disappointed because it's just impossible to tick all the boxes. So that's when I think hype is not a good idea, when it's way too soon, when it's like there's nothing to show, basically. So don't put it in the people's hand to start forming their own hype over something that they don't even understand yet.
Do you want to risk an example?
There was this E3, almost every E3, there was this one game that they announced, and I think you might remember it, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was like, what's his name? Del Toro, the director.
Oh, Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, it said Guillermo del Toro is going to be involved with it, and do you remember that?
No.
And it was like coming out 20, who knows what, like 4 years later or something like that.
Was it supposed to be, was it the Media Molecules follow-up to, no, I'm thinking of something else. There was something with a wizard and a...
Oh, yeah, the one that was showing off the engine, basically.
That's the wrong one, isn't it?
That's the wrong one. But I don't remember. But see, this is how much they showed that I don't even remember the name. It was basically just this flash of a name, and then Guillermo del Toro, and it was supposed to be some kind of thriller game or something like that. And people were like, "Oh my God, Guillermo del Toro!" and "Oh my God, it's gonna be so good." That disappeared and fell out of the sky and just went away into the land of nothingness. That never happened. And dare I say, Half-Life 3?
You may.
That's never happened, and probably will never happen. I'm sorry. And I just thought of another one. There was, I think it was a Capcom game that I was like, oh my God, that looks so good. And they actually did show stuff. So like this, it was an RPG, and it was like a dungeon thing, and I remember this. It was this guy in like it's dressed as a knight, and he was like hiding behind a rock, and there's like fire everywhere, and it looked really, really cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, this looks so good, and I can't wait to play this. And it had a name, but that disappeared as well into the land of nothingness. And people just start to create hype. And then there's the games that actually were released, like 5 years after they were announced. Like, let's say, Ashen. I was looking forward to that game since, I think it's been 3 or 4 years now. And it's still not out. And what I've seen now recently, I was already putting 2 and 2 together in my mind. I was like, oh my God, it's going to be like this. And it's going to be kind of like a more 3D looking Limbo, and it looks like Inside, those types of games. That's what I thought it was going to be. And now they released some gameplay. They finally released some gameplay. And it looks so bad. And I'm so disappointed. See, that's what I'm talking about. Because it's like you have already allowed the player to form expectations just by what they're seeing. Just by one split-second trailer. And they start to say, oh, it kind of looks like this game, it kind of looks like that game. But then it turns out that it's nothing like that.
Do you maybe empathize with the need to have people simply talking about the game even though they're getting things wrong?
I think the definitely talk about the games is a good thing, but not if it's 2 years, 3 years before it's actually done. If it's almost ready, like if it's a year, then yeah, for sure, show something off, get those people excited, get them talking.
Yeah.
And then later on show something else, and then they have stuff to actually formulate their opinions or what they expect, because they're constantly showing them because they've got things to show. Rockstar works like this very much. Bethesda works like this. They don't show things until they're almost ready. And now they have a lot to show, like, frequently. That's when it's like, oh, wow, that looks so good. We didn't know anything about Red Dead Redemption 2 until maybe a year before its release.
Right.
And that game had been in production for years.
Do you think that maybe the need or the apparent need for video game marketing to approximate motion picture marketing is such that you need to establish a presence for a project, even if it means getting people talking 2-3 years before it launches?
No. Games and movies should always be treated as different, because gameplay makes a game. Because, you could have all these beautiful trailers and visuals that don't even represent the game. They'll have like these lifelike, trailers for games, and it's like, is that what the game looks like? It's like, oh no, this is just a cinematic. It's like, well, yeah. Okay, you're basically leaving the gamer in the dark still, because they don't know what this game even looks like. So it's not about the cinematics for games. They might be cool to see and, nice to look at, especially when it's a game. When it works, it's when a game is part of a series. Like, for example, when Mass Effect 3's first few trailers were cinematic, and they were really cool. They looked nice. They got people excited because they knew what the game looks like, basically. It's like, yeah, I doubt it's going to look much different from what we've seen before. But if people were looking forward to just the cinematics, but they're not. They're looking forward to what the gameplay is like, because eventually they're going to be playing the game, not watching it.
Which brings us fairly neatly to the actual launching of projects. They are, in some cases, some of the biggest news events in the gaming journalism calendar. How do you see the future of that panning out? I mean, it's kind of strange. Games aren't really released with red carpet events. Even, I remember Inquisition and going down to an EB Games and actually, being there with 30 or 40 other devs, being ignored by everyone buying. But took photographs of an awful lot of people in cosplay, which was very, very flattering and good to see. But from your chair, how do you see game launching or coverage of game launches changing?
Launching a game to the public means that it's already been played by a lot of big reviewers. I usually don't get involved with that because I play games way too slow to even get anything out of a week early type of thing. It's like, yeah, well, I'm probably going to end up finishing it way later anyways. I don't really like rushing through a game. But it means, that reviewers have played it a week, 2 weeks in advance. After their embargo, which is usually a day before or sometimes on the day of launch, comes the review. And that will affect the launch as well. If the reviews that come after, if the reviews that come before launch, usually they're people that do this for a living, that do reviewing games for a living. So it's like, okay, yeah, you could trust that they are going to really review the game, look at what it presents, show people this is what it does, this is what it doesn't do, this is blah blah blah. I didn't like it, and then share their opinion. That's the type of review that I like, where it's like, okay, tell us what the game does, and then we'll decide whether that's our type of game or not. But I think when it comes to launching a game, I don't think that's ever going to change. I think it's going to stay the same, as in, I don't think it's going to be like red carpets and this and that and like, oh my God, this game has launched. I hope it's not. I hope it stays the way that it is. If people want to get it midnight, then they'll go. But there's rarely ever events anymore. I think there used to be more events back then. Whether they were small or not. I remember even in like GameStops, they do midnight launches at midnight, and they had like cool things there. Sometimes the voice actors would be there, and they'd be giving posters out and this and that, and it'd be all cool. Now, midnight launches are at 9:00, and you just stand in line, go in, get your game, and you're out. And that's it. It's like, yeah, just get it, go, and we want to finish as fast as possible. And I think with games it works because it's like I'm basically going to the midnight launch because I want to play this game immediately, not because I want to stick around and just stand there with people. You know, I want to play the game. I want to go home and play.
So this is the part where we have the challenge of trying to actually sum all of this up. I'll freely admit that I've not been in a great position to be able to actually contribute much to this, but people listen to this because they want to hear you, and I think that I think that they're going to have a bit of a meal on their hands because you're on good form. This is your thing. But yeah, you're welcome. But I think, as you can hear me flipping through my pages, it's kind of crazy because after discussing all that we've discussed, it just seems like video game journalism is a bit of a microcosm of journalism as a broad thing. And what I actually wanted to stress was that there is a definite freedom of a press that carries over to video game journalism, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of notion of partisan approaches in terms of the camps. Although it might be true, there might be dyed-in-the-wool pro Microsoft.
Right, yeah.
And then definite, pro PlayStation stuff, but it doesn't strike me, and correct me if this is way off, but it doesn't strike me that you have to be pro one and anti the other at the same time.
No, it doesn't. Usually, the bigger gaming sites will give their review for all platforms. So it doesn't for gaming. Luckily, it doesn't. That you do get gamers on either side, and they'll be pro, PC or whatever. But when it comes to news journalists and stuff, that we try to, or at least I hope we try, the majority of us try to be as open as possible, because there is a wide variety of gamers, and we want to try to report to everyone.
I think the last time that I was even close to being into the middle of a kind of conflict was SNES Genesis, SNES Mega Drive.
Yeah, that was bigger.
And I've no doubt now that there is, it's a kind of a four-way battle between Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and Switch. In my mind, there's the PC players who are kind of in their own minds, sitting above everyone, looking down on the arena. Then you've got Xbox facing off against PlayStation, and they're trying to tear a shred off each other. And then you've got the Switch kind of hunkered down in the bleachers, just looking adoringly at both of them, thinking, "Oh wow, look at those great guys."
No, they're kind of like the what are they called? They're kind of like the hipster, like, oh yeah, well we did it first, and look, we're doing it like new, and we're doing it better. So you guys, they're kind of like, they're off on the side, and they're like, yeah, well we did it better.
It struck me as a bit of a baseball analogy rather than hipsters. It's like you've got the PC guys as the commentary in the booth above everybody, criticizing absolutely everything. And in my day, baseball was a real game played by real men. And then you've got the two teams in the diamond facing off, and then you've got the kid, the Switch, who just wants to be a professional ball player. I never look at the Switch thinking that that's the hipster smoking a dirty cigarette behind
I totally do.
Really?
Yeah, I see Nintendo as the ones that they're like, oh yeah, well Microsoft and Sony are doing that. Oh yeah, well look at this cool new controller.
yeah. But you need 3 hands to use.
Yeah, you got the Wiimote and the this and that, and where they just like introduce new names to gaming, and they're like, yeah.
But then it always boils down to, and this is just a brand new way to play an old Mario game.
Yeah.
This is how you play Mario this generation, and it's with your mind. We thought it was really important to control Yoshi with your sense of smell.
Oh my god, that would be so cool.
So yeah, getting pulling the conversation forcibly back to the actual point.
For another podcast in the later.
Yeah.
We said in the beginning that we would answer the question whether all of this that we talked about was good or bad, the way that news is being reported now. And in my opinion, you'll have to share yours as well to end on this whole idea. I think I hate saying it's both because, we all need to get along. No, I think there's good and bad things about it because social media and the variety and the availability of information on the internet now is, I think, amazing. I think it's so cool that you could basically just put whatever and you could find reviews, hundreds of reviews from hundreds of different people everywhere. That's cool because you cannot say that you can't say I don't know, because you could just bust out your phone or bust out your computer and you could know. Mm-hmm. So that's cool to me, but I think it's important that people, like any other information, they should take reviews specifically because I think reviews are where where you're doing a game a disservice if you're not treating a review as something important, because that means people will buy it or not. So take it with a grain of salt. Read as many as you can, because just that one person, if you're looking for a review and you're just basing your decision on one person, that's probably not a good idea, because everybody will give their opinion for why they like the game and why not. So that the information is available to all of us, look for as much as you feel you need.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a marginally different thing from my seat.
Mm-hmm.
There's I think video game journalism, I said it a little earlier, it's a bit of a microcosm of journalism, full stop. But I think the bit where it kind of separates itself out is that it's still ultimately about delivering information to people. Mm-hmm. And it also signifies something else, which is, as a developer, is pretty important anyway. But, firstly, I compare a lot of this, political correspondents are kind of like very, very prominent in the news right now. Mm-hmm. Politics is very prominent in the news right now because of certain characters in certain positions of influence. But I think when you've got something like that, you can control elements of how people live, how people die, and the circumstances of those things. It's a very important thing to cover. Plus, when you've got a huge industrial complex based around the notion of politics, you've got donors, you've got backers, you've got PACs, you've got all of this kind of stuff. The machine that reports on that is also part of that industry. Mm-hmm. Here with games, the point that I'm trying to get to with the analogy of politics and political reporting is, you couldn't say that a vibrant political journalism scene means that politics won't go out of fashion. Politics is a necessary part of life, given that populations of people the size that they are can't self-organize on a scale that they need to, given the state of the world right now. You have to have countries and cultures coordinated towards very specific things in terms of industry, but you also need to make sure that people are catered for in terms of things like healthcare and police and fire, and all of those important quality of life points. That should never ever go out of fashion. That should always be there, available to everybody. And the reporting of that kind of thing has to change subtly to make sure that not only are we getting the facts, but we're getting the facts in a way that we can understand. Mm-hmm. Game journalism, you can look at and say, do you know what? This is absolutely on fire right now. Mm-hmm. and as an entertainment product rather than, you know, an entertainment media industry rather than a life or death critical component of culture industry that politics is. Entertainment is very much elective. You know, it's the first to go when other things take higher precedent, and a loud journalism, a loud journalistic presence for video games is a brilliant thing for me, regardless of what it's saying. For the most part, if it's video games are being bashed, obviously that's not very good for me. But if people are kind of chewing the scenery, if people are actually saying this is great, this is not, this is great, this isn't, people talking about these things is a very good thing for the industry as a whole. I remember when we were making Inquisition, there were loads of things happening that we were, you know, reactively quite either intimidated or worried by. The first was seeing Witcher footage arrive, and it was like, oh, crumbs. Looking at what we were doing, we weren't intimidated by the visual quality. We were just, you know, it's just a natural reaction when you've got a big competitor product, right?
Yeah.
And then we would get footage from Capcom from a game called Deep Down, and that was a kind of dungeon crawler as well, and it was presenting artwork of a very, very similar visual style.
That was the game
I talked.
That was the game.
Oh, was that the one that you were thinking of, the Del Toro one?
Yeah, no, that was the one, the Capcom one, the one with the
Right.
the knight and all that, the one that never
Yeah.
came out.
Yeah, right. The one that never came out, and we saw all of the tech demos for their engine as was, and the rendering of it was all very pretty.
Yeah, it was.
So naturally, that's really a worry. But of course, when we saw that footage, a few of us that were maybe a little bit more seasoned than others were thinking, that's never real-time rendering. That's pre-rendered, and it's a tech demo to show off what that engine can do, rather than that isn't, you know, that's not a game. We've got a game.
Yeah.
But the overwhelming sentiment from all of that was, this goes to show how vibrant the Dungeons and Dragons RPG is. There's us, there's them, there's the other, and then there's the fourth.
Yeah.
And if people are talking about us or them, it doesn't matter. They're talking about games in a genre that we are making a very big effort to maintain our position in. And if we make, all we need to do is to make something really good, and we know that we have a decent slice of the gaming audience to actually rely on.
Yeah, especially for that type of game.
Yeah, and that's really important to not lose sight of, right? So, you know, an active and vibrant, not just journalistic, but also a commentary. You know, if you've got good commentary and commentators contributing to a community to keep the energy of that community going, that's absolutely invaluable too. Particularly because it's an entertainment form, you know.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only art forms or entertainment forms that actually makes you earn visibility on the whole work. You know, I know that there are those that have asked BioWare in the past, please could we have a press X to skip combat button, just so they can go from cutscene to cutscene to cutscene to cutscene. And it's like, yeah, no, we have a responsibility to tick the "is this a game" checkbox. And yes, it is a game, because you have to actually do something and learn something and become good at something.
Yeah. Or they add the option in Mass Effect. I don't know if they did it in Dragon Age, but in Mass Effect they put in the
casual.
No, it was story mode, so it makes the combat really easy.
Yeah.
So you can go by fast.
Yeah. Crazy. So that's pretty much it. Thank you ever so much for watching the GamerMD83 podcast. I've been GamerMD83.
And I've been Nick Sadler. I mean, wait, let me do my British voice.
No, don't. So that's pretty much it. Be sure to check the description for all the lovely ways to...
I do the outro. This is the GamerMD83 podcast, and I'm GamerMD83.
Well, I'll be over here if you need me.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Be sure to check the description for all the ways to keep in touch. Stuff like YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys later.